give a brief introduction about the program. I believe Steph is here to do that.
Yeah, thank you. And I will quickly acknowledge that I'm calling in from the unceded territory of the Coatsin people, the Cowichan Nation, and the Hulkaminam speaking people. And it's lovely to see you all here. I am newly incoming the provincial organizer for the BC chapter for the Coalition for Healthy School Food. And apologies if you're hearing this again, if you were in the first webinar, and or if you're already familiar, but the Coalition for Healthy School Food is a network across Canada advocating for the creation of a universal cost shared school food program within the country, giving equitable access to daily healthy school food for all students. And within BC, so that's hundreds of members and endorsers. And in BC, the chapter has been around since 2018, and we have almost 100 members and endorsers. I can put a link to our webpage in the chat. Oh, perfect. Thank you, Krista. And the core of our work centers on three pillars, three kind of main activities. So we're advocating to governments for public investment in school food programs, which has resulted in things like the Feeding Futures funding that's $214 million over 3 years in BC. That started last year. And the second pillar would be engagement and outreach. So that involves a wide variety of all kinds of school food stakeholders across the province, growing this movement, working together, collaborating, which feeds nicely into that third pillar of knowledge sharing. And this webinar is a really fantastic example of that. So I will leave it there and pass it on. But I will also put my email in the chat. So if anyone wants to reach out, get connected or chat more, then please feel free to reach out. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Steph. I'm so glad to have you as part of the BC chapter, and yeah, really excited to see how things evolve as we'll hear a little bit, I think, from our presenters. So okay, just actually before we get right into our presenters, I wanted to give a special shout out. We have 4 youth experts here. Two of them are the youth health ambassadors that Evelyn will be co-presenting with, and 2 of them are from a program called Rise Up, which is a program that's administered by the Public Health Association of BC. And the Rise Up program project engages youth from 15 to 30 across BC in their local food system through meaningful service placements, education, networking opportunities, and community events. So we have a couple of Rise Up youth here, and following the presentations, we will give the audience a chance to ask questions to the youth. And so these questions can be directed to our 2 Rise Up youth, who are Rihanna and Brennan, and as well as the youth health ambassadors that we'll hear from in the next presentation. So as you're watching these presentations and thinking about the questions that you have, you can take a few notes about what kinds of curiosities you have that you want to hear from the youth on. So now I will introduce Evelyn, and Evelyn will introduce the youth that she's co-presenting with. So Evelyn is the Director of Community Engagement with the McCreary Center Society. And Evelyn has extensive experience in community engagement and development through a collaborative approach. Evelyn is passionate about providing empowering, strength-based supports for vulnerable and marginalized community. And Evelyn was a key staff contributor to the report Beyond the Plate, Youth Perspectives on School Food Programs in BC. This report was based on conversations with 256 grades 7 to 12 students from diverse backgrounds and communities across BC. And most of these conversations were led by the youth trained by McCreary staff. These conversations highlighted examples of successful school food programs and identified areas where improvements could be made. So we are thrilled to have Evelyn talk not only about the Beyond the Plate report, but the other work that the youth health ambassadors are doing and their experience working in involving youth in school food programs. So without any further ado, I will pass it over to Evelyn.
Great. Thanks so much for that, Bonnie. Um, I will just share my screen. 1 second. Can everyone see that? Excellent. That's great. So thank you so much for that introduction. I'm so grateful to be here. We'll do introductions in just a second, but first I want to acknowledge that McCreary Center Society is located on the unceded ancestral and traditional territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. And we also want to acknowledge the ongoing and ancestral connection to the lands of the Métis Nation. Now I'm actually calling to you today from the breathtaking lands of the Newhalk Nation in Bella Coola. I'm really hoping the Wi-Fi remains strong, but being here is such a reminder of our connection to the lands. And even driving from Anaheim Lake down to Bella Coola, you just see these thousands of hectares of burnt trees and areas just ravaged by wildfires. And and you see the impacts of kind of past floods. And it's such a reminder of the connection that we have to the land and our responsibility for maintaining and upholding and being stewards of the land. And I'm so grateful and privileged to be here. And I'm grateful to the Newhalk Nation and Newhalk peoples for all that they have done to be stewards of these lands for time immemorial. So I'm so grateful to be here and so grateful to be invited to share at the webinar. Again, my name is Evelyn, and I am the Director of Community Engagement at McCreary Center Society. I'll talk a little bit more about who we are. And with me, I've got two youth. I don't know, Kathy and Allison, do you want to quickly introduce yourself with your name and your grades and which community you're calling from?
Yeah, sure. My name's Kathy, she, her pronouns. I'm a grade 12 student at Mount Douglas Secondary. I live on the unceded territories of the Songhees and the Esquimalt Nations.
Hello, my name is Allison. I'm in grade 7 and I go to Gordon Head Middle School.
Awesome,
My
thanks.
pronouns are she, her.
Oh, brilliant. Thanks, Kathy. Thanks, Allison. They're two of our youth health ambassadors, and we'll be chatting a little bit more with them at the kind of closer to the end of the presentation. But they're really why we're here and why I have anything to talk about today. So excited to get back to that conversation. So we've got a lot to cover today. I mean, talking about involving students and looking at youth engagement and also sharing from the report. This conversation today is going to just scratch the surface and is really meant to provide a bit of a framework to take back to your own schools, your own communities, because you're all working in such different contexts, in such different environments, and with such different capacities. So recognizing all of that, I'm hoping that after today, you'll be able to have a bit of a basis from which you can build and look at and reflect on where you are, where you want to get to. So we'll start off with a brief overview of McCreary and the Youth Health Ambassadors, and then we'll share very quickly more about the project that we did around school food programs in BC with the BC Coalition, some of the Youth Health Ambassador recommendations, and looking at the framework of the conversation that they hosted. And then we'll talk more about what meaningful youth engagement looks like, what it is and why it's important, which I'm sure that you folks already know, which is why you're here. But we'll chat about things to consider if you're looking to implement a youth engagement initiative or strategy, and some steps to take to get that going, as well as some strategies looking at different capacities and different contexts. But again, today is just meant to be an introduction. It's meant to start a conversation, and I'm always available kind of following the presentation. If you want to chat more about what maybe this could look like in your own settings, happy to chat more. I also want to acknowledge too that kind of coming into this work, we do youth engagement. I do youth engagement. I'm not an expert in school food programs. That's your world. And I'm sure most of you are also doing a lot of youth engagement. So I may not be able to answer some of those specific questions for your programs, but that's where I'm hoping maybe we can kind of collaborate and chat and figure out what this could look like with your expertise and with, I don't want to necessarily say expertise on my end, but kind of with my experience and with what we've done with the Youth Health Ambassadors. So with that, let's dive in. Oh, and I've got a lot of links that I'm going to be chatting about over the course of the presentation. I'm going to share those all at the very end of the webinar. So to begin, McCreary Center Society, we're a nonprofit organization based out of Vancouver, but we do work all over the province, and everything that we do is we're dedicated to improving youth health and well-being in BC through community-based research, evaluations, and youth and community engagement initiatives. So that looks like lots of different things. But I think one of the things that we're most known for is our BC Adolescent Health Survey, which is a province-wide youth health survey that's administered by public health nurses every 5 years. And it's administered to students in mainstream high schools in grades 7 to 12. And it's this comprehensive health survey that covers all range of risk and protective factors, all the things that we know impact our health and well-being, things like sleep, peer and family connections. And we also ask about eating behaviors. We ask about food security. And so I'm going to be sharing a few of those brief findings, but we'll also make sure to share the full report, link to the full report at the end of the webinar. But in 2023, the last school year was the last time that we administered the BC AHS, and about 38,500 students participated in 59 of BC's 60 school districts. So it is considered representative of the youth population, that kind of grade 7 to 12 population across BC, and helps us to get this really fulsome and really rich kind of look at what's going on for young people, what's going well, and also those things so we can better support. So we have a number of different youth groups that we support for a number of different projects, but one of our most robust programs is called the Youth Health Ambassadors. So our YHA, our group of young people in grades 7 to 12, all across the province, and they do project-specific work. And the YHA work is all revolves around facilitating conversations with peers on different youth health issues. So some of the projects that YHA have been engaged in the past include identifying kind of emerging or key health issues that help to inform questions for the BC Adolescent Health Survey, as well as creating materials to help promote the survey to schools and to students. YHA did a project looking at the impacts of COVID-19 on youth mental well-being, and then identifying community strategies to promote connection and belonging for young people. There's also an ongoing project around substance use education in school and ensuring that that's kind of coming from a harm reduction and strengths-based lens. And then finally, the school food program project that we did with the BC Coalition for Healthy School Food. So let's chat a little bit about that, because that's why we're all here. But basically, that shows you that there's a real range of projects that the YHA are involved in, and they all revolve around facilitating conversations and gathering youth input and perspectives. So first wanted to, again, kind of provide some context to looking at what's going on for young people around food security and eating habits and what we've seen through the BC Adolescent Health Survey. So in the last survey, again, that was last year in 2023, 6% of students reported having cut the size of their meals or skipped meals in the past 12 months because there wasn't enough money for food at home. And then 9% of students had gone to bed hungry at least some of the time, including 1% who went to sleep hungry all the time because there wasn't enough money for food. Now that's slightly lower than 5 years previous, but it's still higher than 10 years previous in 2013. And I mean, 9% might not seem like a huge number, but when we're looking across the province, that is a huge group of students who are going to bed hungry, who are facing kind of regular food insecurity. We also look at changes, or there have been changes in youth's eating habits over time. So, and again, I also want to kind of acknowledge that coming into these conversations, this isn't to say that kind of sweets and fast food are bad and vegetables and fruit and salad are good. But when we're looking at food insecurity and what kinds of foods that young people have access to, we're seeing, and I mean, thinking about the increasing cost of living in BC and across kind of Canada and across the world, we're seeing that there are changes in youth eating habits over time. So young people are eating kind of fewer fruits and vegetables than previous. We're seeing kind of a high rate of students who are eating fast food or sweets the day before eating the survey. And we've actually seen more than double the students who are consuming energy drinks than 5 years previous. So to me, this all speaks to the kind of critical role of school food programs in ensuring that young people have access and consistent access to things like wholesome, balanced meals, fruits, vegetables, again, all those things that we know help support positive health and well-being and allow young people to kind of learn and be able to be present at school. So we were approached last year by the BC Coalition for Healthy School Food to participate in a two-phase project around to gather youth input on school food programs in BC. And we were asked to lead the first phase of the project that was focused on youth engagement. So we supported our youth health ambassadors and developed a conversation framework and then trained them to lead that conversation with their peers, again, to gather perspectives on what food looks like in schools right now. We'll go over the conversation framework in the next slide. But then the second phase was facilitated by City Hive Vancouver that works on youth advocacy and getting young people involved in kind of civic action and advocacy. And City Hive supported the students to then look at their findings and then share the recommendations, and it would basically disseminate the recommendations and share them with some really key decision makers in the province. And Kathy and Allison were actually part of that cohort that moved into phase 2 and had the exciting role of sharing findings back to the Ministry of Education. So for the first phase of the project, we developed 3 different activities for youth to host with their peers. And in those activities, we wanted to get a sense of, okay, what does food look like in schools right now? And what are youth perspectives on that? What are youth feedback on that? What do they like? But then also, what do they wish was different? So we started off with a brainstorm, and youth facilitated these conversations both online and in person. So you can actually see 2 different examples of some of those brainstorms here on the slide. And it just got young people starting to think about, okay, well, what food is available in schools? Because we also recognize, there were youth health ambassadors across the province, and we recognize that schools have really varying degrees of school food programs. It could be just vending machines or granola bars or a bowl of apples by the front office, or it could be kind of hot meal programs. So we wanted them to think about all of the food that was available at their school. Again, vending machines, snacks, full meals, meals for purchase, and what they liked and also what they wished was different. But we also wanted them, and kind of going back to the theme of the report, Beyond the Plate, we wanted them to think beyond just what's on their plate, but also the setting and what is the entire experience at mealtime in their school? What do they like? And also what do they wish was different? And then the second activity was a design activity where they essentially designed an ideal school food program. And after chatting, I had the privilege of chatting with Brent kind of before this project and identified that it's helpful to go through kind of a census-based conversation. So thinking about, okay, what do you want your ideal school food program to taste like? So what kind of food do you want? What do you want it to look like? Both the food, but also thinking about the space. And you can think about the plating, you can think about the presentation, and what does the space look like? And then again, what does it sound like? What does it how does it make you feel? How does the food make you feel? How does the space make you feel? What kinds of sounds are there? So we went through that kind of census, like the different senses, and again, brainstorming what they thought was an ideal school food program. And then youth asked, okay, well, how could it be fun? Because we want mealtime to be fun. We want youth to actually kind of engage with the food and with mealtime and lunchtime at school. It's often a time for socializing. It's a time to break and kind of relax. And so we want to make it fun. We want students to get excited about food. And so we got a great brainstorm about all the ways that school food could be fun and exciting, things from naming fun meal. If anyone's seen like Bob's Burgers, that kind of like naming fun hamburgers or naming fun meals. And then finally ending off with how could students be involved? Because we also recognize students, the desire for involvement is a bit of a spectrum. It could be, we just want to kind of tell you what we like and what we don't like, or we want to be actively involved in the design, development, and implementation of the program. So that last part of the design activity was brainstorming the ways that you or the student body would want to be involved. And then finally, we ended off with an arts-based activity, and we asked students to draw a nourishing and satisfying meal. So again, we're moving away from the language around healthy or good or bad, and just ask students to envision a nourishing and satisfying meal and then explain what about it made that nourishing and satisfying to them. And it also helps us to see kind of the range of different meals that students like, what they look like, allowed for a lot of creativity. And what I found really interesting too, and we'd shared it with the youth health ambassadors, the Eat Well plate, but we hadn't shared it in the conversations because we really didn't want to lead that too much. But what we found in a lot of the conversations and in this activity is that they so closely kind of mirrored that Eat Well plate. And I will say that these 3 activities were chosen specifically to provide different types of participation. So there's Post-it notes, there's speaking, there's drawing, there's different ways that young people can participate, because we also know folks and young people like to participate in different ways. And we wanted to reduce the barrier for folks to be able to share and feel like they can meaningfully participate in the conversation. So just a quick overview of the conversations in total. So we have over 75 youth health ambassadors kind of on our roster, and they had the choice to participate in different programs. 37 YHA participated in this program. We'd actually aimed for about 10 to 15, but there was so much excitement and so much enthusiasm about it. So we ended up with 37 youth health ambassadors. And again, the YHA facilitated 25 conversations with 154 youth, and then staff, we kind of filled in geographically and demographically where we could. So in total, there were 35 conversations with 256 participants, and a fairly representative breakdown of gender identity, and there was representation from each health authority. So again, it wasn't meant to be representative of the province as a whole, but we did get a good mix of rural and remote communities, urban communities, and communities from each health authority. So being mindful of time, I'm going to very quickly run through the findings, but all of these are available in the report. So again, we'll share that link. And I don't think that it's necessarily anything that is going to surprise anyone. So overall, youth recommended that that schools provide balanced and nutritious meals focused mainly on whole foods. So what came up so much in the conversation was the desire for kind of a balance of food groups, fresh whole ingredients, kind of home cooked meals, and the incorporation and inclusion of treat foods or occasional foods. But the focus really is on kind of whole, whole balanced meals. Next is the recommendation to ensure that there's variety of food and menu options, and that includes kind of ingredients, types of meals, convenience. So there's to-go items, there's maybe hot meals if you can. But even thinking about if your school only provides a granola bar or kind of a snack program, that there's a variety of different granola bars, and or that it changes. And I wanted to highlight this one quote at the bottom here, and this is kind of the value of engaging young people in these conversations, in that at least there was one young person who said, like, all of my friends have braces, or there's so many students in high school that have braces, and my school cafeteria almost never has a soft food item. So when you get if anyone has had braces, you know that once your braces get tightened, it's really difficult to eat hard items. So ensuring that there's maybe at least one softer food item for those students who have braces and have just had them tightened. Recommendation 3 is to regularly incorporate authentic and culturally diverse foods. There were a lot of youth who shared their appreciation that schools provide kind of culturally diverse menus, but also shared that, they're not authentically prepared. It feels almost disrespectful to provide this food and for it to kind of be an inauthentic presentation or preparation of the food. So ensuring that maybe students and or community members are involved in the development of menu items and in the preparation, and ensuring that there is kind of respect paid to food, especially when you're approaching or incorporating culturally diverse foods. Really want to highlight here the importance of ensuring access to traditional foods and gathering practices for Indigenous youth. We had the immense privilege of, we've been over the last year doing some work with schools on Haida Gwaii. And there are really robust school food programs on Haida Gwaii that regularly center and incorporate Indigenous foods and gathering and preparation, kind of food preparation practices for students, and ensure that elders are brought in for those experiences and teach young people the traditional names and the traditional words for different food preparation methods. And young people had kind of overwhelmingly positive things to say about those programs. And one young person had said, my only feedback is that I wish school was open later so I could have dinner at school too. We know that food holds such an important role in culture and in gathering and in celebration. So seeing that in such a kind of tangible way. Schools on Haida Gwaii, I think, is such a great example of the value of that for all students. Recommendation 5 is to allow for choice and autonomy, and this helps to kind of build food skills and food literacy, and like recognizing and acknowledging hunger cues and different levels of hunger, as well as kind of reducing food waste. So students are able to only take the food that they need, and the food that they feel like they can eat, instead of kind of one size fits all. Recommendation 6 is to ensure students have enough time to eat. So often students, maybe the queue for the cafeteria is so long that students at the very end often either don't get meals, or the bell rings and they have to go back to class. Or that students have to go straight from lunch to gym class and they don't have time to digest. There was a lot of conversation about not having enough time to eat and properly digest. There was another piece of feedback for a breakfast program that said that the student said, we love the breakfast program, but it only runs until 8:25 and the buses get in at 8:30. So is there any way that you can extend even 5 minutes, or kind of allow for passive participation, to extend that time? Recommendation 7 is to reduce stigma and barriers for students to participate in school food programs. I know this was covered at length in the last webinar, so I won't go into this too much, because I think that was a really robust conversation, but is really important for participation, especially for those young people who kind of face the most barriers to participating and may need the food programs the most. Recommendation 8, provide opportunities for student engagement and input, which is what we're going to chat about today, so I won't dive into that. And then the final recommendation is to improve eating area conditions and layout. And we're going to chat a little bit about what this could look like. But there was a lot of feedback around the hygiene of eating spaces, and that there's often not enough space, or maybe lunchrooms don't exist, cafeterias don't exist, lots of students eating in the hall. Classrooms used to be open, but now they're closed, and that there are some students who maybe want to study and eat, and they can't do that in the library. Some students want to kind of socialize and have fun. So recognizing that different youth, different kinds of spaces, and how can schools support that, even if you have limited capacity to actually kind of expand a lunchroom. Another thing that came up was the need for clearly labeled waste management systems. They said that, like, even when we have kind of garbage, recycling, and food waste, you get really kind of tripped up when you go up to the separation system. So having really kind of clear posters to help students and feel kind of less anxiety about that, that came up a lot in the conversations. So now this is kind of why we're all here, is talking about meaningful youth engagement. I think we all kind of know a bit about what it is and why it's important. So I'll go over this quite quickly, and then we'll chat more about some strategies, and then talk to the young people. But McCreary Center Society, we do a lot of youth participatory action research. We do a lot of what we do is involving and engaging young people, especially young people, kind of marginalized or vulnerable young people, and young people with lived experience in research that affects them. And we define youth engagement as the meaningful participation and sustainable involvement of young people in shared decisions in matters which affect their lives and those of their community, including planning, decision-making, and program delivery. And there are many frameworks for youth engagement, and I think many of you are familiar with Roger Hart's ladder of participation, and this is one that we refer to quite often in our work. And each rung represents a different level of youth engagement, from kind of rungs 1 to 3, which are non-participation, so manipulation, decoration, and tokenism, where maybe young people kind of have a seat at the table, but their voice really can't affect change, or there isn't space for youth voices to be heard in design development. There's no kind of meaningful role for young people. They're there for a photo op. They're there to maybe voice their opinion, but it doesn't go anywhere necessarily. And then rungs 4 through 8 are kind of increasing degrees of youth engagement. So I do want to acknowledge too that not every part of a school food program or of an initiative is going to be kind of that rung 8, that it's youth initiated, and there's kind of shared decisions with adults. The reality is that you may have varying degrees of engagement possible or realistic kind of within different parts of a project. So we can chat about what that looks like. And it doesn't mean that a project has kind of failed or it's less meaningful. But the reality is that sometimes there are limits or scopes within a project. So it's important that young people are really supported, or that some kind of behind the scenes work is done by adults. And that's okay. So kind of what's important is that you're reflecting on all of the parts of a project and maximizing or kind of optimizing the level of participation within each part. Oh, and I will say too, like the lateral participation, diving into each of those rungs, we've developed a guide and a toolkit around meaningful engagement for youth with lived experience in research that affects them. So I'm going to be sharing that guide and that toolkit, and it really dives into all of this kind of in more detail. But just wanted to share a bit about that. So again, I don't probably need to go into this too much, but why is youth engagement important? And when we're thinking about school food programs, I mean, like one of the kind of expressions that we abide by or we really value in our work at McCreary is one that was coined by the Disabled People's Organization. And it's nothing about us without us. So it's important that youth voices are involved in decisions that affect them, because it can hopefully increase student participation when they know that their voice is being heard, that changes are being made based on what they think. It can youth engagement can help identify issues and creative solutions. So I keep going back to that braces. It's been so long since I've been a teenager. I remember the pain of trying to eat an apple when your braces have just been tightened. So this is why it's so important to ask young people, what are the issues, and what can we do about it? Because they might come up with some really brilliant solutions. It also ensures that programs are responsive to student needs, and kind of those needs change over time, and ensures that young people, or helps to build a sense of belonging and investment and purpose. I mean, youth can't vote. And this is an opportunity for them to vote for things that directly affect them, and they can see change kind of usually sometimes quite quickly. Also helps to foster relationships with students, and builds trust with students and decision makers, and provides opportunities for skill building, like leadership opportunities, or just a feeling of responsibility and kind of civic action, that knowing that your voice can be heard can come. And again, it can, depending on the process, help to empower young people to know that their voice can make a difference. So where to start? And I think before you even start a youth engagement initiative, it's important to step back and reflect on where you're coming into, where you are coming into this work. So you'll see two images on this screen, and these are both taken from that toolkit that I was mentioning. So again, I'll share that link at the end of the webinar. But the checklist on the left is a series of reflection questions, and those reflection questions are meant to help you reflect on your preparedness, your experience with youth engagement, kind of coming into this. And it's important to think about, okay, where are you now, both in terms of your familiarity and comfort and experience with youth engagement, but also thinking about how much do you engage young people in your program now? And then you also want to think about, okay, well, where do we want to be? And this is particularly important for thinking about where you want the program to be. If you have very little youth engagement, and you want kind of a full-blown youth advisory committee, like that's quite a jump. And will just require extra steps, extra capacity, and extra resources to get there. So you want to think about, where am I now and where do I want to go? Again, what experience do you have? And again, that's helpful going through those preparedness reflection questions. How prepared are you, both in terms of resources, time? If it's the end of May, how prepared are you to kind of get something going before the end of June, or should it happen in September? And what are the barriers to engagement? So we'll dive into that in a second a little more, but what barriers might you have to address, or what barriers young people face in participating in some kind of youth engagement initiative, and how can you lessen those barriers and increase participation? The matrix on the right is also a really great tool or reflecting on what your kind of where you're at on that ladder of participation in different parts of your proposed initiative, and where you want to go. So again, it's just a reflection tool, and it's important that you're taking that time to reflect on where you are now and where you're going in order to kind of determine those next steps. So in terms of some actual steps to get going for or to get a youth engagement initiative going, first you have to identify your goal. So there's a whole spectrum of youth engagement. Starting on one end, it's just seeking feedback. It's maybe a little bit more passive. You want to know what young people think about the existing program, or maybe provide input on if you're looking to expand a program or add menu items, or something that's a bit more passive and a little bit less involved, but still good youth engagement and still getting young people sharing their opinions about a program. But it's important that you're identifying, like, is that your goal, or is your goal to kind of develop a student advisory council, kind of an ongoing advisory committee, or to involve students in program facilitation, in the actual implementation of a program? And that kind of identifying your goal and identifying your capacity are kind of go hand in hand. So these two steps kind of, you can go back and forth, because you may have the goal to develop an ongoing advisory committee, but your capacity is limited, and your capacity to actually make change and the opportunities for youth voice to kind of make change with decision makers or in the school might be really, really limited. So you also kind of in tandem with identifying your goal have to identify your capacity, because I recognize you're all coming into this and you're all working in contexts and in schools and programs with very different capacities and different limits. So if your limitation right now is just the snack program and that's all that we have capacity for, we don't have a kitchen, we don't have a lunchroom, that's very different than a program or a school that has a full culinary program, a full cafeteria, and a much bigger budget or student base, or much more incentive or desire for change from the staff team. So you have to also identify your capacity and identify those limits. And that's, having limits is completely understandable. And it's important that you're identifying those limits and then also communicating those with young people. Because we want to make sure that youth are informed of both kind of what information you're seeking, but also where it's going. So if you want to create or host a focus group, but youth don't realize that the capacity to actually implement changes is very minimal, it's a disservice to young people. And it's that's kind of less meaningful than being honest to say, you know, the reality is we have this snack program, so what can we do within our limits? The third step is to recruit support, because none of us can do this alone. We all have such limited capacity. And so who are your champions in the school, in the community? Again, this is also going to depend on your goal and your capacity, but it's important that you identify and approach possible staff support, whether that's a teacher that runs maybe the student leadership council, or a really involved or engaged student, or kind of, sorry, a really involved or engaged teacher, or interested students. Maybe you put up posters and kind of say, do you want to have a say in the future of school food? And students will self-identify. Or you could approach an existing student group. Again, this is requires less capacity on your end to just go to a leadership group, or maybe a mental health group, or maybe there's an environmental group, student club. So is there an existing group that you could possibly engage, or are there kind of interested students that you've already made connections with? And the teachers and the student leadership clubs or existing student clubs, for example, could also identify some of those other student champions that may not step forward as well. And again, if you have a little bit more capacity, you can also engage other community stakeholders as well. So that could be interested parents, that could be food vendors, that could be chefs, that could be nonprofit organizations. Where else does expertise, interest, and capacity lie in the community to help support your goal and help to build your capacity? Next up is co-designing activities. Now, the space to kind of co-design, again, is going to depend on your capacity, but ideally you're working with young people to help identify what questions you ask and how you ask them, design activities, develop materials such as posters to maybe promote focus groups, or if you're building a student food committee or student food club, they can maybe design the posters or do the announcements, and they can help to promote the engagement as well. So I will say too that when you're working with young people, sometimes it does require a lot of support to make sure that, for example, if you're doing a questionnaire, you might brainstorm all these questions, and it will require a bit of it may require extra support on your end to ensure that questions aren't leading, and you can have kind of lessons with young people talking about survey development to ensure that it's kind of open, that it's asking questions that aren't leading, etc. But it's okay to kind of step in, support young people along the way to ensure that it's appropriate. And reduces or kind of allows for meaningful participation for all students. Then you go into administration and facilitation. So you're providing, ideally, you're also providing opportunities and roles for youth to support with the administration. So that could even be putting up posters on the wall if you're doing kind of a sticky note or brainstorm on a hallway, or it could be facilitating conversations. It could be administering a survey or questionnaire. And then finally, you're analyzing and reporting back. So this is where you kind of gather all the information back up, regardless of, or depending on what kind of engagement you've done. And alongside the youth, you are identifying key themes and priorities. We're going to chat about democracy. We love democracy at our organization. But with the youth, you'll kind of take everything that the students have said, identify key themes and priorities, and then they help to craft recommendations and share those back with key decision makers. And then finally, ideally, you're also creating kind of an ongoing communication or feedback loop with the students, because if you want to create kind of meaningful participation for students in a school, not only when we're asking them to share their thoughts and their perspectives, it's important that we're also going back to them to say, this is what we've heard. Have we interpreted this how you have intended? And this is also what we're doing about it. This is the change that's being made, because they will kind of lose interest and they will disengage over time if they keep sharing their perspectives and they don't see anything done with it, or it never comes back to them. So it's so important to create that ongoing communication and feedback loop with young people. Some important considerations when you're looking at meaningful youth engagement. First off, it's so important, especially when we're talking about food, which can be a very kind of challenging conversation, food security, when we're looking at, rises in disordered eating and eating disorders. It's important that we're taking a trauma-informed approach when we're approaching these conversations. There's a whole section in that toolkit and guide talking about what a trauma-informed approach looks like, and some reflection questions for you. But it's important that, like we did with the YHA conversations, you're providing different opportunities for engagement. It's not always standing up at the front of the class or kind of sharing out loud in a circle. It could be Post-it notes, it could be anonymous suggestion boxes, and that we're kind of approaching this through a strengths-based lens. And we're really working and focusing on building trust and relationships with young people, because unless you have that trust, unless you have those relationships, you're really not going to get very far. That's the basis for all of this work, especially when we're looking at vulnerable or marginalized young people. It's important that you're taking a rights-based approach, which kind of is fundamental to all of this. So the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child states, Article 12 states that kind of young people have the right to freely express themselves in decisions that affect them. And UNDRIP, Article 18 of the United Nations Declaration on Indigenous Peoples, also states that Indigenous peoples have a right to kind of assert their needs and share their voice in decisions that affect them. So it's important that that is kind of fundamental to all of this work, and that we're addressing the rights of those, especially those who face systemic barriers, society, kind of especially when we're having conversations about food, that we're finding ways to engage young people who face systemic barriers or barriers to participation, that they are kind of actively involved, and there's kind of meaningful and safe space for them to voice their opinions. and perspectives. And finally, that it's inclusive and culturally sensitive. Now, I know that you talked about this at the last webinar, so I won't go into this too much because I'm already probably over time. But I just wanted to quickly, I won't go over this too much, but I wanted to, and all of these slides will be shared out with all of you. But this kind of shows a spectrum of youth engagement strategies, depending on the capacity that you have, and kind of how quickly or how easily you want those strategies to be implemented. So lower resource and easier to implement includes things like questionnaires. It could include a poll, which I'll chat about quickly. Posters to brainstorm ideas with sticky notes. It can be put up in a hallway, kind of something a bit more passive. Could be kind of more anonymous than a focus group, and much easier to administer and analyze. Could be things like suggestion or feedback boxes. I want to highlight this discussions during meals. Sometimes youth engagement is just asking young people what they like. It's just having a conversation. And as school food coordinators, here in Bella Bella, I was actually chatting with the staff member who leads the food program, and she plays an important role in that she's this consistent adult and is the supportive adult and the caring adult for a lot of students in the school. And over time, she's been able to build up a relationship with young people, and they feel comfortable coming to her to talk about their problems, to tell her what's going on. So you may hold a very important role in just having that relationship. And I don't want to kind of understate the value of just sitting down and having conversation about with young people to say, okay, what do you like? What don't you like? And what would you do differently? So there's a lot of value in that, and it's fairly easy to implement if you have those relationships. And then it goes all the way through higher kind of medium resource and harder to implement things like focus groups, youth-led discussions. We're actually doing a project with a group in the Cowichan where we're actually training their group of young people, similar to how we trained the youth health ambassadors to host conversations with their peers. So that's something that we're open to exploring as well, but takes a bit more resources, but builds skills for young people and helps them or allows them to host conversations with their peers. I also want to highlight here this one-time youth project. So we have a program called the Youth Action Grants at McCreary, and so for our YAGs, we fund youth-led projects up to $750 to address some kind of issue or to improve youth health in some way, shape, or form. And there was a school in Burnaby that identified, okay, students don't really have a comfortable or welcoming space to eat at their schools. So they applied for a YAG, and we funded them to paint a mural at in their cafeteria, in their lunchroom. They bought more comfortable seating, and they kind of beautified and kind of bought decor to improve the feeling of comfort and welcoming, feeling of being welcome and belonging in their lunchroom. So that's something I'll also share more information about the YAGs, but requires a few more resources, but is a really great project that students can see start to finish. Okay, I'm going to shift because I wanted to we won't chat about this. I know that I'm way over time. There's just so much to cover here. But I wanted to highlight two examples of possible youth engagement projects or youth engagement initiatives, depending on the capacity and resources that you might have. So even if you have just a really limited snack program where all you can provide is granola bars and juice boxes, maybe you have, you put up posters on the wall where you kind of write out all of the items that you typically buy, and you give students stickers, and they're able to vote on their favorites. And that helps you to see, okay, what do students like? And then maybe you provide an opportunity for them to share, okay, if you could get a different granola bar or a different juice box flavor, what would you like? Or how do you like your apples prepared? Or what are your favorite apple types? So where can you find some choice and kind of seek some feedback, even if you're working within limitations? I put down here kind of a snack bracket. I was imagining like a March Madness where you have all of the different granola bars types and you're kind of creating a bracket of different granola bars, because it also helps to see which granola bars youth like, what are their favorites, and kind of gamifies it a little bit. And then again, on the other side, and these slides will be shared out, but on the other side is something that's much more high resource, requires much more capacity to implement. So now I'm so sorry. There's so much to cover, but I wanted to quickly flip over to to, sorry, Allison and Kathy. And I was just wondering if you could both share just a few sentences about your experience and what you learned, and if you have any takeaways for the group. And especially those schools or staff who are looking to maybe implement school food or school student engagement initiatives of their own.
Thank you so much, Evelyn.
Well,
I realized that like facilitating like conversations, it was also like a personal growth journey. Like it was something we have never done, and like that led us to like have the courage to like speak to adults and like people we don't know about like our opinions and our like youth insight. Um, the conversations that we led also empowered other youth to like share their like insights, even though it was like sticky notes, they felt like they had a voice. And that's really important to like have these conversations, have youth to be able to like share their perspectives surrounding youth help programs, because that really builds their like confidence and their willingness to like just share about like different things. Um
yeah, it really like surprised me like how much my friends actually cared about this matter. Like, um, like I kind of thought like they wouldn't think it was serious or anything, but they really actually cared about it, and they really wanted to like, share about their experience and their personal voice.
yeah, I found like similar things to what Allison found. Like youth really want to like share what they thought about the food program, because a lot of it like use our breakfast program. So like having the ability to like provide insight about like what's happened, what they would like in their like food programs, like it's really important because they're the ones using it in the first place. Mm-hmm. For tips about like facilitating like student conversations with students, having like a student to like co-lead or facilitate with the teacher is really important, because first they can get like their friends to like come and like start off the conversation, which will lead more people to like come and like speak at the conversations, so it makes it like less awkward, but like students will also be able to share. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Do you have any kind of, sorry, go ahead, Allison.
No, you can continue.
I was just going to say, did you have any kind of final thoughts about why it's important? And I recognize that I say this having just blabbered on for 45 minutes, but is there the value of any kind of final thoughts on why it's important that we're asking young people about school food programs?
Well, as you said before, it's like directly affecting them, but also it like makes them feel like they have a voice, which before this, I didn't really think that I could make any change because I'm still pretty young in seventh grade. But this like led me to believe that I can actually make a change, and that made me feel great.
Yeah, I second what Allison said. Like school food programs like affect almost every single student at that school. So every single student has their own perspectives on like their experience with the food program and like what we can make it better. So like it's important to include like all students who like want to participate and want to like share their opinions about their food programs to make them better. Thank you.
I have one final question, just very quickly. What was your favorite of those three? Do you remember the three activities that you did for the conversations? Which one was your favorite?
My favorite was probably like the draw on my plate one, because like what's on your plate one. Because like it really showed me like what foods people liked and like the diversity of the foods. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with Allison. Like when I was collecting everyone's like food plates, every single one was different. Like everyone's was like colorful, full of their own drawings, but it was also really personal and unique. And that's like really important. Everyone has like their own unique perspectives. And it's really important to like include that more food programs.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for sharing. Kathy and Allison will be joining for the brainstorm or for the breakout rooms as well. And we'll stick around afterwards if we have any other questions. I'm going to pop those links in the chat, but we have so much more to cover. And again, I'm so sorry that I took up so much time, but I'm happy to connect with folks afterwards if you have questions. And I will make sure that my email is also in the chat if you'd like to chat more about the YHA project, how this could look, what this could look like in your schools, or to talk more about youth engagement. Thank you again for this.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Evelyn. So much richness there. I think we're going to move into the presentation from Brent and then just have a longer time for Q&A instead of doing breakout rooms. So what we are going to do is have hallway time after the webinar is over. So if folks are interested in making connections with other people who are on the call, we really invite you. We're going to keep this room open for at least 20 minutes after we're finished. So folks can chit chat or have that sort of smaller group setting. So I will move into introducing, oops, just 1 minute. Brent Mansfield. Okay, yes, thanks, Brent. Have you got your, I'll let you get your slide set up while I read your bio. So Brent Mansfield is the edible education teacher at Lord Roberts Elementary School and a strategic advisor for the Coalition for Healthy School Food. Alongside teaching students from kindergarten to grade 7, Brent also helps to forge government relations, coalition fund development, and advocacy. After running 90 kilometers to raise awareness about the needs for school food programming last fall, Brent was invited to Ottawa and is there now, in fact, to witness the development of Bill C-322, an act to develop a national framework to establish a school food program. Brent's program, Lunch Lab, focuses on youth involvement, access to healthy food, hands-on learning opportunities, and community connections. So we'll hear from Brent and then move into a Q&A for our speakers and our youth.
Awesome. Thank you, Bonnie, and thank you, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. And I want to, as myself and as a teacher, share some reflections on my work and desire to bring students more meaningfully into school food programs. And yes, I'm actually zooming in from the Anishinaabe-Algonquin territory. I had a wild day full of meetings that I'll share stories with about another time, but really want to make sure we leave lots of time for Q&A here. So as an elementary school teacher, I have the privilege of teaching students from kindergarten to grade 7. And I think when we think about youth engagement, I think it's so critical to look at high school age youth. But I think there are many opportunities that are similar and different when we talk about the opportunity to engage some of the younger students. Sorry, there we go. So just quickly, I wanted to make the connection here to the Coalition's guiding principles around promoting of food literacy and the idea of a comprehensive school food programs that not only offers delicious food for students to sit down and enjoy, but empowers them to be actively involved in that, developing food skills, knowledge, attitudes, but also just the opportunity to sit down and enjoy a meal together. And I think we want to not just expand a coalition, expand to having universal school food programs, but how can we do those in the best possible way? And that's involving students at whatever age they are at in a developmentally appropriate way. I saw Jennifer Black on this Zoom. This is a quote from an article that I had a pleasure of being a community co-author on that I really loved, that kind of summed up some of the reflections of some practitioners here in Canada. And is really thinking that how do we think of school food programs as being done with rather than for youth. So as we think about this, as we're designing these programs, as we're dreaming big in Canada and in BC, what opportunities are there that students can be involved in all the ways around engagement, but also in running some of these programs. And I'm going to share a little bit about my experience with Lunch Lab at Lord Roberts and what that might mean for ways that we can involve students. And it's often at a younger age than most people, I think, want to give them credit for. When we set out to create Lunch Lab, when we said we're going to be doing it with grade 6s and 7s, people are like, grade 6s and 7s aren't normally involved in food preparation. I'm like, great, doesn't mean they can't be, right? I think we often, limit well, I think limit all youth in terms of what we think they're capable of by deciding what is possible and what isn't not possible. So part of the adventure that was co-founding Lunch Lab was actually demonstrating that it is possible and that youth do want to be doing this. So a little bit of the context at Lord Roberts, I, as a teacher, teach edible education to kindergarten to grade 7. So I have the experience of working with all ages of students as a prep, and they're involved in the garden in simple food preparation activities, which really sets the platform for Lunch Lab. And Lunch Lab at Lord Roberts is an extension, so students of mine are able to apply to be on both the chef team and clean team, and I'll tell you a little bit more about what that means. So chef team is grade 6s and 7s apply to be part of it. We have about 80% of my students are involved in chef team. We always start the year with grade 7s because they're ready and keen to go. And by the time they get towards the end of grade 7, sometimes maybe a little bit less so and distracted and ready to go to high school, which I understand. And they are meaningfully involved in all aspects of food preparation. They're the ones who serve the food. They wipe down and help put away the tables. I won't go into too many logistics, but they do that every second week, and they rotate throughout the school year. So they all who wanted to get an experience of that. There was over 100 students this year at Lord Roberts. And then something that actually was advocated to me by my grade 6 students who were mad that they could not be involved, we created Clean Team. And I said, I mean, I got an idea of how you can get involved if you want to get involved. And it involves scraping the dishes and stacking them up. And I actually think the grade 5s and 6s might enjoy Clean Team more than the grade 6s and 7s avoiding chef team. It's a hoot. They have bubbles. They work together. They count how many trays they wipe, but it's they're contributing back to this community, and it becomes something really meaningful. And the biggest complaint I get from Clean Team is they don't get as many shifts as they'd like. So it's a really fun one, and you almost have to see it to believe how much they enjoy prepping it, and know that behavior does not always translate home. Want to just name this, and this is, I know I'm not talking to a lot of teachers out there, but community partners and school food coordinators and others. Grade 6 and 7, there's a direct curriculum link. In BC, we have the Applied Design Skills and Technologies curriculum, which below that you can tie food into, but in grade 6 and 7, there is actually explicitly food studies content. So the idea of now we have school food programs being developed, there is a justification for involving especially grade 6 and 7 students through this kind of basic food handling and simple food preparation techniques. There's a million other ways we can connect it back to the curriculum that I'm not going to go into today, but there is a great avenue beyond just the health education and other places we might see it tying in. Other ways to involve students, and I'm going to think, Evelyn did such a good job, and I think there's a lot of similarities here, but is actually involving them in making their own decisions. So as much as possible, allowing them in the salad bar to choose what they want, to have different options, vegetarian, non-vegetarian, and accommodate those choices, and allow that to be self-serve, because we actually trust students to make choices that benefit them. And the research shows that it's going to be the most effective in changing their behaviors long-term. Division of responsibility. It's not our job as adults to decide, whether or how much students eat. That's their job. And we want to model that in food programs. So giving time to eat and giving that space where they can choose what they eat and what they don't, and kind of what that looks like. And also another big one is actually places to eat together. And I know this is a challenging one in schools, and it's often in classrooms and they're kind of at their desks, but I think the autonomy to be able to choose who you sit with and what you need in that given day. Again, I'm not going to go too into, but menu input. I've done some in past years, done more with students where they actually design meals and make suggestions, or we're working right now on surveys for students where they can give input into what is most meaningful to them about their experience at Lunch Lab, not just the menu, but all aspects of that, right? So how can we think of how to meaningfully engage students? And I'm not going to go too much into that because such a good job was done earlier. I also want to talk about student voice and advocacy. I think this one is often missed, and this has kind of been my own project and, trial this past year. And I can say, I think it works. I'm in Ottawa, partially because I think I was able to carry the voices of my students. The film, yes, you get to hear my talking head talk in the film, but my favorite part of the film is you hear from my students. And we didn't script them. I actually set them up, got them talking to the filmmaker, and I walked away because I didn't want them to talk with me there. My chat function is going to struggle. I'll throw it in afterwards. My other favorite interview that I did, CBC on the Coast came down to the school and they walked around with a mic and let whatever student they wanted to talk to the reporter, and that went on CBC. So amplifying student voices, so it's their voices talking about what they want. And it's not just adults talking about that. And that was 2 examples from this past year. Actually, let me see. I have it right queued up in the chat. Oh, no. I'm going to do this really quickly, just if you want to check those out. They're kind of fun ones, both those links. Also, you know, in the run that Bonnie mentioned was art. How do we actually, other ways of being creative in our advocacy? I was doing silly things on social media to try and get attention. Well, how do we actually encourage students to do that? So we had tons of art. We had vegetable-based memes. I've even got a t-shirt with Bob Brass printed on it. When I wear it at Lunch Lab, the kids go wild. But again, it's like, how do we think outside the box? How do we involve youth in advocating and creating the kind of world and programs we want to see and kind of empower them in that way? Another one here was when I ran, guess who was running along with me, often cutting me off at times, sometimes slightly dangerously. Their art was involved in all the press conferences when they couldn't be in front of a camera because it was too hard to coordinate media release on that day. I wanted to make sure that I was standing there, but their art and their representation was there with me. Letter writing. Right, letter writing is very clearly in the curriculum. It's named in several spots in both social studies, but also in the core competencies around advocacy. Let's get students writing to trustees and to support them to do that. These were letters to the Prime Minister that I had the opportunity to hand off, not to Trudeau, but to some of his staff that I know got to him. Right, so how do we encourage that kind of action and kind of, you know, giving students their voice? And that level of involvement in school food programs. A couple more, and just actually last one here I'll say is, we have the opportunity in Canada right now to create and learn from other programs around the world, but create models, one, that are universal, that benefit all students. Because if we dream of a program, I mean, I said this in a committee meeting today to a room full of politicians. If we dream of a program, and I can imagine what Lunch Lab is and all the pieces it is, would I imagine leaving any student out of that? No, that's something I want for all students. I want it for all students in Canada. So how do we create a program that isn't just for all students, but is actually integrating these kind of like student voice and food skills and learning and all these opportunities that actually make it meaningful to them and that are going to impact them for the rest of their life, not just around what they might choose to eat and, you know, the skills that they have around cooking or knowledge of where their food comes from, but their sense of empowerment and ways that they can contribute to their community. So that's, you know, that's my brief interlude on layering on how we can also engage elementary students in many of these things as well. And I will stop my share there.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Brent. It is super inspiring to hear about what you're doing. And I love that letter writing idea. It's such an, you know, it's part of the curriculum. And I really appreciate the ties to the existing curriculum that you highlighted. I'm going to ask Brent to get us warmed up with questions. For those who are not on Menti, or for those who are, you can join in and pop your questions in the little survey there. But we'll ask Brent to ask the first question to our youth, and then we'll head to audience questions after that. So go ahead.
Yeah. So Allison and Kathy, you kind of began to spoke of this, and I'll also ask Brendan and Rihanna to is right. You heard me talk there, right? I am passionate at seeing more young people use their voice and feel confident in leadership to be able to speak to adults, whoever they are, whether they're elected officials, whether they're administrators, decision makers of some type. How can we, I'll say as youth allies, because I think we're here because we care, how can we do a better job, or what do you need from us to feel confident, and how do we get you and all your friends involved? Because I think I'm so happy you're here. We need 100 times more people. So what can we do to make that happen?
Well, when you like ask like a youth, don't just expect them to like immediately just give you an answer. Like give them time to like think of something, because like maybe after you ask them the question and like they walk away, maybe they come up with something, and then they're too shy to just go back and talk to you. So maybe just give them time.
Yeah, think what Allison said is like really important, and also like gaining like youth trust, like not like expecting like every time you go talk to them, you expect like their student voice and opinion, but like actually getting to know the youth will make it so much easier to like ask for their opinions when like you really need them. Thank you.
Yeah, and Brendan or Rihanna as well, if you guys want to jump in, any thoughts on that one?
Yeah, I'll jump in. I definitely think that adults have that position where they have like, some form of platform that a youth doesn't. And so like that can be a career that you're in, like any organizations or anything you're a part of, and anything along those lines. And I think just inviting youth to be a part of that and, like consulting with, either an organization you work with or volunteer with and say like, hey, there's these really passionate people who have like, so many things that they could add. And I think just really inviting like open space to hold youth in those is so important. That's how I've gotten involved in a lot of things that I am right now. And I definitely wouldn't be in that position where I am today without adults first. Well, I mean, I guess I kind of am an adult now, but like someone who has more life experience and more career experience than I do, just inviting that space open for people who don't, and just, being able to then have that platform that you share with you.
I think a lot of what Rana just mentioned there is kind of what I was thinking too. Um, like, yeah, I think I'm stretching the boundaries of both being an expert and being a youth, perhaps. I'm 25 here, but um, you know, a lot of like adults, whether or not they are like an expert on a topic, a lot of like youth perceive adults to be like the trusted, voice on a lot of topics, and so sometimes it can be like um not diminishing or demeaning, but you feel like you don't have much to contribute because the adults always know more, they always know best, right? And so sometimes to like support the youth, I guess, in the sense of making sure that their voices do actually do matter, and um, even if the person believes that the adults always believe best, to support the youth and make sure that it is a space where they can share their opinions, their thoughts, their beliefs, and everything like that. Because I know growing up, I was always somebody who thought like, hmm, what does my voice matter? Like the adult knows best. But if that kind of stigma can be broken or that kind of thought can be changed, then I think that is a really good place to start conversation with.
Amazing. Thank you so much for those responses. It's really great to hear from you. Just from your perspective, the way that we can enforce that idea that the youth perspective matters. There's two questions in the Menti right now that I'll pitch both to the youth and the speakers, but maybe we can toggle back to Evelyn and Brent, and then the youth can chime in after if they would like. And both of the questions are kind of around. One of them is how to get started in grade 6, 7 classes if there's not kind of a culture of youth involvement yet. And the other one is around how to get started if you don't have a dedicated teacher, the way that Brent is in the lunch lab. And so, yeah, just if you can, I think these questions are kind of related, just around like how to get started at the very beginning stages. If you have any advice or feedback on that.
I can maybe pitch in just briefly, even about this, the kind of seeking youth input, or just getting students starting to talk. And then I think Brent will be able to speak more to kind of more fulsome. A lot of our work is in sharing data back with students, and that students in grades 7 to 12 in lots of different kinds of communities. And in doing that work, you walk into a classroom and you start kind of throwing out percentages and talking about stats, and sometimes you just see kind of the will leaving the room, and we've gone into a lot of classrooms where that's been the kind of the conversation that we've had with school staff before we even go, is it's kind of an apathetic space, or there haven't been a lot of opportunities for students to feel like they're involved or to share their voice. And what I've always found, I want to kind of go back to something Kathy and Allison were saying too. Before you can get even to engagement and asking perspectives and even that first step, it's about relationship building. It's about kind of building trust with students and knowing that what they're going to say, kind of that trust will, and when you build that relationship, it will go towards them knowing that they're not going to be laughed at or dismissed when they share their perspectives. So, I mean, first and foremost, it's about relationship building, which I think a lot of teachers, a lot of support staff, a lot of school staff are already doing. So once you have that, I would even just say, like, start passive, start really easy, kind of low barrier to participate. If even, and this is kind of looking at the youth feedback, youth engagement side, less about the involvement, but even just putting a poster on the wall to say, what's your favorite meal? What's your favorite snack? Like just getting students starting to talk about food, starting to reflect on their feelings, their experiences with school food at or food at the school, but really starting baby steps, getting them starting to talk about what are their favorite meals? What's your, if you're celebrating, what's your favorite celebratory meal? Like, what do you want to eat on your birthday or at a celebration? Kind of draw your favorite, like draw a plate of your favorite meal. And then you can like providing those, in my experience, providing kind of those passive activities to start, gets them starting to participate, starting to engage. It's really low barrier. And then you start to build up towards something that's kind of more engaged, more involved, and where they're actually kind of informing the program. And again, also goes back to that feedback loop. So once they've shared their opinions, sharing back to them and showing them how that's actually affecting change.
Do you want me to jump on that one on where to start? Yeah, it is a tough one. And I'll be honest, teachers and schools aren't always, you push something on them and it doesn't work. So the flip side is there are opportunities that you can choose to get involved in. So enticing, like it could be in a school, it could be a leadership club. Sometimes there's some version of that in grade 6 or 7s, some where there's upper intermediates are involved in some sort of leadership activity. I think this could be a good fit for a club that might be interested. But my hope is, and I'm hoping to set some precedent in, is that this is a great curriculum-based learning opportunity that is project-based, that is hands-on, right? So are there ways to pitch that to schools of like, hey, there's a great learning opportunity for teachers to get involved in. It's linked to these aspects of the curriculum. We would love to pilot this with a number of students, or sorry, a number of teachers and students who would like to be involved. That kind of framing is often more enticing because then teachers feel like they're opting in and choosing to be part of something, and there's an opportunity there. So I'm not sure who that question is coming from, but community partners or school food coordinators, I do wonder about opportunities to, engage teachers in the question of like how they would like to be involved, and kind of pitching some of these ideas and helping them understand some of the possibilities of ways that their students might be able to be involved. I think things like highlighting the grade 6, 7 applied design skills and technologies food studies content as a way to look at, how are we leveraging, the fact that we're delivering these programs with kind of basics, food handling and, food skills knowledge opportunities might be a way to go about it.
Awesome. Thanks, Brent. Any suggestions from the youth or any additional comments on that?
I can jump in if no one else has anything yet. Yeah, for the first question that was asked, like how would you suggest starting small with grade 6 and 7 involvement if it is not a part of current school culture? I'd say I think that no matter what school, there's going to be some sort of culture around food. Like food is something that we eat at every day, and in some form or another it definitely just connects us. And so I think just starting those conversations and asking those questions that everyone so far has said will just be the start of really emerging what that culture looks like within your school. And then as well, any suggestions on how to do some of these things without a dedicated teacher, I'd say definitely use your community resources. If you have like local institutions like college or universities, there are students who are very much passionate about these issues as well and would love to like volunteer, and as well like community organizations. I know like I'm currently on the traditional territory of Lheidli and Prince George, BC, or yeah, we're all in BC. But yeah, like there's REAPS here, the Recycling Environmental Action Programming Society. They do a lot of programs that they offer to schools and as well adults around here, surrounding everything around recycling, composting, and food. And so I'd say definitely just use your community resources. There's lots of dedicated people out there that would love to just really help make this happen within school settings. And then there was a new question that came up of how to balance use suggestions with structural constraints outside of a school's control. This is definitely something that I've come to realize, like with a little bit of work with the Rise Up program, and then as well like through like Farm to School BC. There's a lot of regulations that are outside of the school's control, but I think just really like, you know, acknowledging those suggestions and being like, yeah, these are great ideas, but you know, unfortunately, like some of these things we can't implement, and here's why. Like just being really transparent and real, you know, there's no big surprises that there's regulations and policies out of control. And I think just really, you know, being honest with your students about that is really critical. Like there's nothing to hide about like policies and all that. And I think the sooner they understand that, the sooner they'll be able to be like, okay, well, maybe let's try this out first if we can't get to that. And like, we'll then like maybe want to take more action, like Brent was saying, like with letter writing and action like that. So, yeah.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Rihanna. That was such a great way to end our webinar. As we're signing off here, I just wanted to, I put this opportunity for a chat waterfall. So they're kind of digesting what the youth and the presenters have said. If you want to pop a sentence into the chat around what small change you can do right now with your existing capacity, budget, time, etc. Sometimes we call these like the 15% solutions. We know that there are you know, various like stages of regulatory environments and capacity for teachers like Brent who are focused on this. But we'd love to hear and share out with the people who are watching the recording what kinds of solutions you can implement right away with your existing time, capacity, and resources. So if you want to pop that in the chat as you're signing out, we also have a survey, a feedback form. Just it has 2 quick questions, and we would love it if you could fill it out. No pressure if you're rushing off to dinner or whatever the case, but we just want to know what you learned and what we can do better. So uh, Krista, maybe you could pop that in the chat a few times so people can access it as we're seeing their responses come up. And we will officially end here and let folks go off to whatever's next for them. But as I mentioned before, we're having hallway time. So if people would like to stick around and meet other people on this call, we will be here for the next 20 minutes or so debriefing and having a chance to have more intimate conversations. So thank you again so much, Allison, Kathy, Rihanna, Brennan, and Evelyn and Brent. This was a super rich webinar, and I'm really excited that we've kind of brought together all the information and all of your hard work over the last many years on this topic. So thank you so much. And we will hopefully have more webinars in the future that you can join.
Bye, everyone.